Hello student, with the system analysis is designed in the unit 3. Last topic is normalization. Normalization means the complex data is converted into simplest form of the data. Normalization is the process of organizing the data in the database. Normalization is used to minimize the redundancy from a relation or set of relation. Is used to minimize the redundancy, duplicacy of data on a set of relation. It is also used to eliminate the undesirable characteristic, insertion, update, deletion. Normalization divide the large table into the smaller table and links them using relationship. Database design is not perfect. It may contain various type of the redundancy, duplicacy, which are like a bad design for any database administrator to handle this data, managing a database. For this reason, use the normalization. Use this complex form of the data into the simple form of the data. This normalization provides there are the three types of the normal form. The first is first normal form, then second normal form, then third normal form, and then fourth normal form. Then the first normal form is the relation. It is in first normal form. It contains an atomic value. It states that an attributes of an table cannot hold multiple value. It must hold only the single value attribute. First normal form disallows the multi-value attribute. It does not allow the multi-value attribute, composite attribute and their combination. First normal form is defined the definition of relation itself. The rule defined that all the attribute of the relation must have the atomic domain, must have the only one value. Suppose we consider the one example of the first normal form, one table. There are two attributes. First is the course and second is content. First is programming and the next is web. Programming content, there are various types of the languages: Java, C++, PHP, Python. And in the web there are the various types of the web. Content, web HTML, PHP and ASP.NET. Here, this is the complex form of the normal form. There is one programming language. You decide Java, decide C++, decide or Python, decide. This is not multi-value attribute. But first normal form do not support. Its state table cannot hold the multiple value. Here is the multiple value, but the first normal form do not support. It states that attributes of the first normal form table cannot be hold multiple value. It must hold only the single value attribute. We rearrange this relation of the table to convert it into first normal form. Here, if you convert this, it is in the first normal form. The first is the course and their content, Course is programming. Second is programming. Third is web. It is converted in programming Java, C++, web is HTML, PHP and ASP.NET. Course and their content. Each attribute must contain only the single value of its predefined domain. These attributes, it state that an attributes of a table cannot hold the multiple value. It must hold only the single value. Here it contain hold the multiple value, but you convert this table into the first normal form. Here these attributes and their value is contain only the single value. There is no multiple value. In this way, this table is converted into first normal form. The first normal form cannot hold the multiple value. It hold only the single value attribute. Second is the second normal form. Second normal form. Second normal form. Second normal form. The second normal form. In the second normal form, relation must be in first normal form. In the second normal form, the relation it is in first normal form. In the first normal form, do not contain the multi-value attribute. In the second normal form, all the non-key attribute fully functionally dependent on the primary key. The primary key, what is primary key? Primary key, in the which attribute you assign the primary key, their value is not null, their value is unique. Prime attribute, which is a part of the candidate key. In this way, the first one table of the student project. Their student ID, their project ID, student ID, project ID, student name, and project name. Their student ID is student name, project ID is linked with project name. Here in the student project relation, that primary key attribute is student ID. Primary key is assigned to the student ID and the project ID. Primary key means which attributes their value is not null, their representation is unique. Not null means student IDs, there has the only one value, their value is not null, not zero, their representation is unique. There is the same student ID is not assigned to every student. There is student ID is different, student name, project ID is different. The primary key attributes of the student ID and the project ID, according to the non-key attributes, the student name and the project name must be student name and the project name must be depend upon both, not any of the prime attribute. They are dependent on the project name must be depend upon the both. There the project name and the student name must be depend upon the student ID and the project ID. The student name can be identified by the student ID. Project name can be identified by the project ID. Project name can be identified by the project ID independently. This is called the partial dependency. They are dependent upon Project name is dependent upon the project ID. Student ID is dependent upon the student name. This is called the partial dependency. In this way, student ID, student name, project ID, student name and their project ID in the student and in the project. In the project ID and project name. In the second normal form, all the non-key attributes, all non-key means here is student name and here is the project name. There are the non-key attributes are fully or functionally dependent on the primary key. The primary key is assigned to the student ID and the project ID. The student ID is totally dependent upon the student name and the project ID is totally dependent upon the project name. The second normal form relation must be in the first normal form. Means that there is no multiple value. In the second normal form, all the non-key means there are no assigned to any key. Key means there are assigned to keys assigned to the attributes. There are assigned to the attributes student ID, their project ID. They are assigned to the primary key. When you assign to the primary key, their attributes representation is unique and the not null. That is totally depend upon student ID is depend upon student name, where we represent in the table student ID, student name and the project ID, the project ID and attribute and the project name. In the second normal form, all the non-key attributes are fully functionally dependent upon the primary key. Next is third normal form. Third normal form. Third normal form. For a relation, it is in third normal form. It must be in a second normal form. Or following must no prime attribute is transitively dependent. Non-prime attribute is transitively dependent upon the prime key attribute. The relation will be in the second relation will be in third normal form. If it is in second normal form, not contain any transitive partial dependency, third normal form is used to reduce data duplication, duplicate of the data, same type of the data. It is not allowed in the third normal form. It is also used to achieve to data integrity if there is no transitive dependency. For non-prime attribute, the relation must be in third normal form. The third normal form if hold at least one of the following contents of the for every non-trivial functional dependency. Student first is suppose table of the student detail. Their attributes is student ID, student name, student ID, student name, their city, their zip code. These types of the attribute. X is the relation, it is in third normal form if it hold the at least one condition for every non-trivial functional dependency. X is totally functionally dependent upon the y. The x is the super key, y is the prime attribute. Each element of the y is a part of some candidate key. Candidate key means, firstly see the super key. Super key is a set of one or more attribute. It is a set of one or more attribute which can uniquely identify row in a table. Here is one or two attributes. Here is student ID, student name, city. It is a one set and it is called as the super key. There is functionally dependency which also known as non-trivial dependency occurs means A holds the B where B is not a subset of A in relationship. If attribute B is not a subset of the attribute B, then it is considered as the non-trivial dependency. In relationship, if attribute B is not a subset of attribute A, here is X here is if Y is not a subset of attribute X, then it is called as a non-trivial dependency. We find that in the student ID is the key is only the prime key attribute. In this way, the third normal form. First table is student detail. In the student detail, student ID, student name and their zip. Student ID, student name and their zip code there, and in the zip their zip and their zip code, their zip and their city. The city can be identified by the student ID as well as zip itself. Zip is a super key, nor a city is a prime attribute, and is additionally student ID, zip and their city is the exists a transitive dependency. Student ID, their zip and the city. This is the transitive dependency. Means how the transitive dependency, city can be identified by the student ID as well as zip code also, and neither zip is a super key nor city is a prime attribute. In this way, the third normal form is used. Next topic is roles and the responsibility of database administrator. Role and responsibility of database administrator. Database administrator means which one is handle all the operations of the database, provide the security, provide the authentication, handles the data, proper store it. The first responsibility is software installation and maintenance. Software installation and maintenance. The DBA means database administrator, often collaborate with the initial installation and configuration of the database related software, Oracle, SQL Server, etc. database related software. The system administrator set up the hardware and deploy the operating system for the database server for the handling the database software. Then the DBA install the database software and the configure it, update it properly as update update is required, and he update it. The database the DBA handles the ongoing maintenance also. New server is also, data is stored in the server. There is the large scale of the data is stored in the database server. DBA handles the transfer of the data from the existing system to the new platform. The DBA handle the transferring of the data from the existing, means when which system you are using, this system existing system to the new platform. Next responsibility is data abstraction, data extraction, transformation, data extraction, transforming, data extraction, transformation, and loading. Next is specialized data handling, specialized data handling. Next is database backup and recovery, database backup and recovery. Data extraction, transformation and loading refers to the efficiently importing large volumes of the data that have been extracted from multiple systems into the data warehouse and environment. This is the external data is cleaned up and transferred to fit the desired format, so that it can be imported into the centrally where is data is stored. This totally properly data is extracted, transferred from the from one source to another destination. There are the large importing the large volume of the data, extract the large volume of the data that has been extracted to the from multiple system into the database warehouse environment. These types of the responsibilities performed by the database administrator. Next is specialized data handling. Today database can have the massive and the many content of the unstructured data type, such as images, documents and the sound and the video file. There's a various formats of the data is stored in the database. Managing in a very large database this and may require the high level of the skills and the additional monitoring and tuning to the maintain the efficiency. There are the it requires to the high skill database administrator. They have to monitor it and the properly handle it. There is the unstructured form of the data is properly handled by specialized data handling. These types of the responsibility also performed by the database administrator. Next responsibilities database backup and the recovery. DBA creates the backup. DBA means database administrator creates the backup and the recovery plan and procedure based on the industry best practices. They make sure that the necessary steps are followed. Backup cost and backup cost time and money. They are required to backup cost and money is also database administrator how manage take the necessary precaution to preserve data. Various large scale of the data is stored in the database. They have properly take the planning to plan and procedure based in the properly procedure and properly plan. The data is properly backup and the recovered. Any files you have missed and the corrupt these files is also recovered from the database. These types of the responsibilities also performed by the database administrator. In the system admin and the other personnel may actually create the backup, but DBA have the responsibility make sure that everything is done on a schedule. In this case, server the failure or the other form of the data is lost. DBA will use the existing backup to restore lost information from the system. Different types of the failure may require different recovery strategies. DBA must be prepared for any eventually with technologically change. It is becoming even more typical DBA to back up the database, like various types of the software is used, cloud, Oracle Cloud or Oracle database. These types of the software is used for the backup of the database. Next is security. Security is most important responsibility of the database administrator. DBA needs to know the weakness of the database software and the company overall system work to minimize risks. No system is 100% immune to attack of the any cyber attack, but implementing best practices can minimize the risks. In case of the security breach or the irregularity, the DBA can consult to see who has done what to the data, and the audit trails properly auditing the data. Any problems are creating in the data, any files are not corrupt, any no unauthorized access is not provided. Proper security is provided by the database. This responsibility is also performed by the database administrator. Next is 6 important authentication. Authentication, setting up employee access is an important aspect of the database security. No any unauthorized access, no any unknown person is not accessing the database. DBA control who one is access and what type is access they are allowed. Any employee not access the whole data of the database. The for instance, user may have the permission to see only the certain pieces of the information, only the certain information they have provided to the access, they have provided to authentication, and they may be denied the ability to make changes. They have not ability, they have not due to the authentication to changes in the database, changes in the system. Next is capacity planning. DBA needs to know how large of the database currently and how fast it is growing in order to make the prediction about the future need. Storage refer to how much room of the database take up in the server, how much the capacity of the database to take up the data in the server, and the backup space. Capacity refer to the user level in the company growing quickly and adding many new users. DBA will have to create the capacity to handle the extra overload of the data. Next is performance. Monitoring. Next is database tuning. Then is troubleshooting. Performance and the monitoring the database for the performance issue is a part of the ongoing system maintenance of the DBA platform. If some part of the system is slowing down processing, the DBA may needs to make the configure changes of the software and add the additional hardware capacity. Many type of the monitoring tools are available. Part of the DBA is job to understand what they need to track the improve the system. These types of the performance monitoring responsibility is also performed. Next is database tuning. Performance monitoring show where the database should be to operate as efficiently as possible. The physical configuration, the way the database is indexed, how queries are handled can also have the dramatic effect on the database performance. Next is troubleshooting. DBA are also troubleshooting in case of any problem, whether they are need to quickly restore the loss of the data or correct it issue to minimize the damage. DBA need to quickly understand and respond to problem where when they are occur, where they are arising the problem, where they are lost the data. These types of the troubleshooting responsibilities also handled by the database administrator. Today close your